3D guns have been all over the news for the past few months, and now finally a state government is making a move to try to ban them. We're going to cover the bill. This is coming out of New York, and then talk about some of the consequences of it. So, the New York State Senate has a bill that would amend the New York Administrative Code to make it illegal to use a 3D printer to create any part of a firearm unless the person is a licensed gunsmith. A gunsmith using a 3D printer to print any part of a gun would be required to notify the NYPD and register it within 72 hours after the manufacture. In addition, proposed revisions to the code include language ensuring 3D printed guns fall under the same regulations as other firearms already do, and this includes clarification on systems to feed bullets, requirements for a serial number, and regulations against destroying weapons. Now, this is the bill that's currently being debated and has the most chance of possibly passing the New York legislature. There is another that's being sponsored by State Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal of Manhattan, which has a lower chance of being passed. Now, I'm not covering this because I think that this is like the way to stop the 3D printed gun threat. I think that they're doing what they can in a relatively liberal state to fight back against a perceived threat. I think that bills like this are extremely unlikely to have any effect on the construction and manufacture of these 3D printed guns. Because really, how are you going to enforce it? Like, somebody gets sold the 3D printer, which are not hard to get, by the way, and when you buy one, there's no indication that you're buying one to construct 3D printed guns, and then you can print them. I mean, maybe they'll try to track the torrents. That seems extremely unlikely to be effective. But so I guess props for them for trying to, in their view, protect their people, but it's unlikely that this is going to have any effect on the actual manufacture of the 3D printed guns. Now, this article, which is coming out of the Epoch Times, also quotes a couple of former homicide detectives, one in particular, Ernie Encinas. He is not very worried about 3D printed guns posing a significant threat in the future. He says, "I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem, people making their own guns. Why would you use a cheap gun when you can get a regular one on the black market? If a bad guy wants a gun, he's going to get a gun." Now, I know for those of you who are in favor of 3D printed guns and believe in a very strong interpretation of the Second Amendment rights to firearms, you probably agree with this. And I think to some extent, Ernie Encinas has a point. Now, I think, though, when you say if a bad guy wants a gun, he's going to get a gun, that is extremely oversimplifying the importance of difficulty in dissuading someone from doing something. So currently, let's say an analogy, it's similar actually because it involves the torrents. If I want to download a movie or something like that, if there's one place that offers the torrent rather than 10, it's harder to get it. Okay, I might still download it. To use his analogy, if I want the torrent, I'm going to get the torrent, but I'm less likely, I suppose, especially if there aren't a lot of people seeding it on that particular torrent site. If I know that it's going to take a very long time to download it in the future, I'm less likely to continue to do so. And so the difficulty in acquiring something does affect behavior. And when it comes to the illegal use of these firearms, we want it to be more difficult. In particular because not all crimes, in analogies like this, it seems to be as if these criminals are all these masterminds who are planning out, okay, here's what I'm going to do in 3 weeks, and look, if I have to go to the black market, or if I can download a torrent that'll allow me to blueprint out a 3D printed gun, then I'm just going to move on to the next step of my plan. But that's not how it works in all cases. There are crimes of passion. There are people who act irrationally in the moment. A 3D printed gun is not something that you can create in 5 minutes, but if you know someone who has a 3D printer, or if you have one, the access to the 3D printed blueprint could be something that in a time of emotion is something that you might pursue. And so making it a little bit more difficult may allow you to move past that emotional state. So look, I'm not going to continue to debate the merits of 3D printed guns. I think that they're out there. More sophisticated designs will continue to be distributed throughout the world. I'm personally a bit scared by the prospect, but I understand that there's very little that can be done at this point to stop the spread. I think that New York is doing what they think they need to protect their people, but the chance that this bill is really going to stop the continued distribution of these blueprints or the manufacture of the actual guns seems at the present dicey at best.